We're in a really very, very serious mess indeed. It's one thing to be stuck with low growth, which we've been for some time now, productivity barely budging and declining in parts of the public sector, and public sector productivity well down from where it was even a few years ago. That's bad enough. But we now face a really serious fiscal crisis with the debt ratio at around about 100%, huge amounts of debt interest walking out the door. The debt dynamics, anyone who's looked at this issue or read of previous episodes, get really scary when as and when the markets lose confidence in you and you end up paying more debt interest, and that makes your credit position even worse. So that's the position we're in. It ain't very nice. Well, thank you, Barry, for that fulsome introduction. I've spoken to this gathering before. I'm not sure what I'm more surprised about, the fact you've invited me back or the fact I've accepted. Anyway, here we both are. Now, Tim has ranged broadly, I think, in keeping with the title of the session, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to confine myself really to matters economic and give you some idea of what I think the right approach is for Britain's economic management, shall we say, going forward. I want to start off, though, by stating the bleeding obvious in the spirit of Fawlty Towers. That's to say, we're in a mess. We're in a really very, very serious mess indeed. It's one thing to be stuck with low growth, which we've been for some time now, productivity barely budging and declining in parts of the public sector, and public sector productivity well down from where it was even a few years ago. That's bad enough. But we now face a really serious fiscal crisis with the debt ratio at around about 100%, huge amounts of debt interest walking out the door. The debt dynamics, anyone who's looked at this issue or read of previous episodes, get really scary when as and when the markets lose confidence in you and you end up paying more debt interest, and that makes your credit position even worse. So that's the position we're in. It ain't very nice. Okay, so I will try to sketch in a moment a way forward, but let me start with Brexit, not least because I think everyone on the panel has got some sort of famed position on all this, and certainly I was one of the musketeers with my book, The Trouble with Europe. Now, let me say, I don't think Brexit's been a great success. Don't worry, I'm not going to stop there. Neither has it been the disaster that many on the other side claimed it was going to be. And I'm appalled by all those economists who come out with point forecasts as to by how much Brexit has harmed the British economy. Is it 4.1 or 4.2% GDP? Absolutely ludicrous. They ought to be ashamed of themselves in a time when so many things have changed, including the pandemic and the war in Ukraine and so on and so forth. It's very, very difficult to tell, frankly, what would have happened if Brexit had not occurred. All I can say is I suspect we have actually been net losers economically from Brexit, small. Why do I say that? Because there always were going to be some losses deriving from leaving the single market, but there were also potentially some large gains. But I thought these followed a different time path, really. That's to say, I thought the losses would come sooner and the gains would come later. And linked to that, we haven't done anything with the Brexit freedoms that we gained through leaving. And this was an act of, largely, I think, incompetence on the part of the government of the day. Now, there have been some advantages. Of course, we mustn't lose sight of those. There's the budget contributions, not having to pay the EU budget contributions into the distant future. And Tim alluded to this, there's the foreign policy freedom we've got being outside. And although the EU, by and large, or parts of it, have come in behind Ukraine, the UK was there first. There's vaccines, where we did a pretty good job of using our freedoms outside the EU. And there are various other things. Trump's tariffs, for instance, where we've come out better than the EU. We've done all right on all that, but I still think at the moment the net balance is not positive economically. Does that mean we should rejoin? You must be joking. Not on your Nelly is the technical expression, because there is still the prospect of realising those gains, and I'll come a bit to talk about that a little bit later. I always thought this was a long-term decision with long-term implications, and it's bonkers to be thinking that it's been a failure because we're, whatever it is, not quite 10 years on. Linked to my Brexit beginning, does the future of this country depend greatly on joining some bloc or other. Now, Tim's talked about this unpronounceable acronym to do with the Pacific countries, and it's good, I think, that we're in it. It's a good thing. I don't myself think that it matters a great deal, I have to say. I don't even think it would matter a very great deal, believe it or not, if we actually rejoin the EU. I don't want to do it for all sorts of reasons. I don't think this is the essence of what's going to determine Britain's prosperity or otherwise over the years to come. What I think determines our prosperity is doing the right thing, doing it persistently over many years. And actually doing the right thing inside the EU is a lot more difficult than doing it outside the EU. And I'm going to say something about what those right things are going to be. Now, I mentioned low growth, and I said we've got this twin crisis of very low growth and also a crisis of government debt. What is the way out? Well, it seems to me to be quite obvious, really. Obviously, we want there to be higher growth. Who doesn't? Even Rachel Reeves wants it. Whether she's done much to get it is another question. And maybe there's some things we can do to stimulate it, which I'll come on to in a moment. But in my view, we absolutely have to cut government spending. And I do not mean just footling little cuts. We have to reimagine the scope and role of the state in the economy. And so in order to be able to think about substantial cuts in the total. And those substantial cuts will be to do two things. Not just to cut taxes. In fact, that wouldn't be the first thing I would be doing, other than maybe one or two strategic ones. The most important thing is to get the deficit down and to get the debt on a downward trajectory, believably so, for the years to come. Then, once we're confident we can do that, then it's a matter of devoting the fruits of cutting government spending towards cutting taxes. So on growth, I see these two things as being closely linked. I've already indicated that out of the approach of cutting government spending ultimately comes lower taxes, and that's going to be one of the things that's going to stimulate growth. But over and above that, there are a series of other things that we could do. Now, not everyone in this room is going to agree, but I happen to agree with the Deputy Leader of Reform, the importance of ending the mad pursuit of net zero. Which, if we had an intelligent energy policy in this country, that would do an awful lot to stimulate the economy. It would also do a lot to stimulate manufacturing, by the way, which the Labour government keeps banging on about. But if you clobber manufacturing with the most expensive energy in the world, what result do you expect to get? So I'd certainly be doing that. Now, with regard to government spending, it's all very well to say you were going to cut it. What would you do? Well, I'll give you a few ideas. I happen to agree with the reform policy of ending the payment of interest on commercial bank deposits at the Bank of England. I've written about it for many years, exactly what I would do, but I wouldn't go overboard on it. And since it's a form of tax, really, on the banks, and I want to get down to the business of lower taxes. It sort of gives the impression of being something that doesn't come with any pain, but it will come with pain because the banks will pass on the effects of this to their customers in lower deposit rates and higher loan rates. So it's going to be a tax on all of us if that goes through, but I don't think we'll notice it too much. I don't think it'll affect our behaviour greatly, although it has the danger of pushing financial flows outside the banking system, which I don't think on balance is a good thing. But anyway, I would do that. But you've got to get to grips with the welfare bill. It is positively ludicrous, the position we're in. And when this current government can't push through these footling measures to save £5 billion, it's a pretty serious position. And despite the prevalence of grey hairs in this room, which Tim has already mentioned, surely the triple lock has got to go, isn't it? We might, most of us, be sufferers from that, but frankly, it is an iniquity that we've got the triple lock. It's generationally unfair, and it's, strictly speaking, unnecessary, and it's extremely expensive. Civil service numbers, which have risen dramatically, they've got to be cut back. Public sector pensions, ludicrously generous, they've got to go. And then we get into a whole series of other areas, which I won't go into in detail, but the NHS, I would favour, can't do this immediately on day one. It's difficult even to get elected if you want to do this at all, but I would favour moving to a social insurance system of the sort that operates in the Netherlands and a number of other countries quite successfully. I think we could do that, and I would reform higher education and so on and so forth. So there are a whole series of things that can be done. This is a problem really of politics. It's a problem of a government getting elected on such a programme. It's a problem of mustering and finding the political will and determination and vision to put through a programme like this. But of course, this has happened before. Mrs. Thatcher accomplished something quite remarkable, in my view. Not everything she did was right, but she did accomplish something quite remarkable. I mean, thinking about the mid to late 70s, they were pretty grim. I guess we all remember them. And out of that came commonly known as the Thatcher Revolution. But it wasn't only about her, of course. A whole load of other ministers around her, very, very capable, who pushed through some reforms, and we did transform the economic performance of Britain. But not only here, there are umpteen other examples as well. Look at what's been achieved in Singapore. Look at what Germany and France achieved after the end of the war. Look at what Poland is achieving now. Once communism was, and look what they did once they got rid of communism. They really went for a pretty Thatcherite approach to economic policy. So it can be done. It really, the politicians have got to get elected. So in a sense, the responsibility lies with all of us. But then it's down to them. And on that note, I'm going to hand over to two of the leading suspects.